everyone, it's Renee with Delaney Jane Cards. Welcome back to my channel. Today I have my very first video for the Die Cut Divas design team. And it is a blog design team, but I of course have a video. So I'm going to show you the process. I will have their blog linked below where you can go read everything I have to say about this card and how I made it. What I used was a bunch of Hero Arts products because Hero Arts is sponsoring a blog hop or a contest or you'll have to check the blog out. They are sponsoring this month, and I know that there's like prizes, so you'll have to check all that out. Just pulling out the different products I used. I used a brand new stamp and die set and a super old stamp and die set. Well, not super old. Hero Arts has been around for like 45 years. I'm not 45 years old. Close, but not quite. But I have a My Monthly Hero kit from November of 2016 that I mixed and matched with a brand new stamp and die set that Hero Arts has on their website called the Florals Nasturtium. Now, I liked this floral. I thought it was gorgeous, but I had no idea what a nasturtium looked like. So I had to do some Googling. I Googled and I found that there were all sorts of different colors, but there were these orange and yellow tones, and I fell in love with this like golden color that these flowers end up being. So I used my Copic markers and I listed the Copic marker colors on the bottom of the screen, and I am going to take you through the coloring here. I laid down my lightest color first, then I added my mid-tone and then my darkest, what I thought was going to be my darkest. And then I decided that that was not dark enough. I did not have enough contrast, so I pulled out the oranges here and added a lighter orange, a mid-tone orange, a darker orange, and then yet a darker orange because I didn't get the contrast that I wanted. And I think the darkest is actually a brown. Orange, brown, and yellow work really well together, and they are pretty natural colors. That's what you would see in nature. Usually things that are orange have brown tones and yellow tones in them, so I didn't feel like I was doing this flower any disservice by adding all of these colors. You don't need all of these colors to color this, not at all. Oh no, it was a YR27, which is a super dark orange, really. It's a brownie orange, but it added so much to the texture and to the contrast. I do believe that before I'm done coloring, I pull in yet another brown because it just wasn't deep and dark enough for me. But it is what it is. And then I blended it back out. I didn't go all the way out to the largest marker. I went to the first yellow, I think. Here it is, the E14. I just absolutely needed more contrast. It was not enough for me, so I did add the E15 and then blended that out with the YR27 just a little bit. I do love this floral image. If you want to practice with an image, now this is a big-ish stamp, but a small-ish stamp. The flowers are big enough to practice your blending in, but the stamp itself is small enough that it won't take you days to color it. So I did cut out most of the coloring here. See, even a darker brown, E29. I just wanted so much more contrast in these flowers that I just didn't feel like I was getting it. So I just kept finding a darker tone and putting it in where I thought it would be the shadowiest, the darkest. And you can definitely see the contrast just change. Here's even a darker one, E79. And this one, I believe, does it. It adds so much to these flowers. You can just, they look kind of, I mean, they don't look flat, but they look kind of flatter. And once this dark goes in, they are not flat anymore. They are not. And then I did blend this out just a little bit, making sure I didn't have any super harsh edges because I didn't want super harsh edges. So for my leaves, I did go over the whole thing with the the lightest yellow just to brighten everything up. So for my leaves, I have 3, see all the markers? I have 3 greens, and I end up bringing in a 4th. Oh, there's 4 greens. So I did lay down my lightest color where I kind of wanted to saturate the paper. So where I wanted to color the darkest, all the tones but the lightest tone, I added this color. Where I wanted my highlight to be, I left white because I didn't want layers and layers of that color. I wanted to work my way to it. So then I just lightest to darkest. If you're practicing with your Copics, I would recommend lightest to darkest, darkest to lightest. You get a really good blend. It's nice to map in your shadows with your lightest color where you think they're going to be, because if you are not in the right place, it's easy to cover your lightest color with a darker color. So some of these leaves have like folded over edge, and some of them are on top of each other, and there's going to be shadows in certain places. And you know what? I can't even tell you where all the shadows are going to be because I just enjoy coloring. There's a lot of rules, and I do follow some of the rules. I really do. I try to put my darkest shadows where things lay on top of each other or where something is behind. But in all honesty, I color to enjoy myself. And if I'm going to put a bunch of rules on it, I don't feel like I'm going to enjoy myself as much as if I just color. So, I mean, I do try, like I said, but it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes I'll think that I had a light source in a certain direction, and then I'll look at my image and I'm like, that is not what happened here. But I'm not hard on myself because it's just coloring. I'm just making a card. So here I was just blending everything back out just a little bit, and you can see that there is contrast and there's shape and there is depth in these leaves. They are not without that, but I am just saying that they aren't perfect. If you want perfect, I'm not your person. Not at all. I'm just a person, not perfect. And neither is my coloring. But if you want to practice practice alongside of me, well, maybe then I'm your person. There's a lot of colorists on YouTube. There's a lot of classes that you can take if you really, really want to learn the ins and outs of Copic markers, of shading, of coloring, of light sources, all of that stuff. I honestly just color because it's good for my soul. Makes me feel good. I enjoy it. It's a mindless thing, and I want to keep it that way. I don't want to have all these rules attached to it, so I try not to. And there was this little bud at the bottom. I just made sure I colored that in because even though I'm not about all the rules, it would have been really funny if it was green. So I did go outside the line just a little bit, so I am cleaning that up with my colorless blender. I am going to die cut this, so I need to make sure that that white border is white. It's really important to me that I don't have bleeding color into the white border. So here I lined up my die, and then I lined up the little circle tag from my monthly hero kit that I was talking about, and then I put my paper on the back of my stencil, and I just used some tape and I stuck it to that. I am going to dry emboss with a rubber mat. So I'll show it to you here. You can see that it's very subtle, but it's there. It adds so much texture. It's super pretty. So then I ink blended carved pumpkin, and I will bring in some rusty hinge just over the edges. I wanted to kind of bring out more of that texture, and I liked this yellow undertone, but I really wanted it to be more of that golden color to go with my nasturtiums that I colored, and I thought this made it blend a little bit nicer. And then I wanted a even nicer blend, so I brought in this blender brush. Just can get a lighter touch. I wanted to make sure that I blended the harsher edges out onto the center of the cardstock. I wanted it to be yellow, but I did want to make it that golden tone. And I think that that's what this achieved, that carved pumpkin over top of this kind of golden yellow cardstock. And then I wanted to darken up my edges just a little bit here, so I did add Rusty Hinge and just blended that in just a little bit. Rusty Hinge is a very orange brown. A lot of times I use it in the Distress Oxide and the Distress ink to add depth to my orange when I'm blending orange. So the same as when I'm coloring with my Copics, I use a brown or an earth tone maybe to add depth to my oranges and yellows. I do the same with my ink blending with this Rusty Hinge in Distress Oxide or just the regular Distress ink line. I do like that combo, and you can see here that it definitely reads that golden orange color. So there is my panel, and then I needed to, well, when I die cut my flowers, I also die cut the actual die cut shape out of black cardstock as well. And I do plan on stacking all of this. But the thought here is that I kind of want a bunch of different layers to add a bunch of different dimension. This card is pretty flat as far as there's not a lot of foam tape, but there is a lot of dimension. There's dimension in the coloring, there's dimension in the embossing, there's dimension here because I've stacked two very heavyweight black cardstock dies underneath this nasturtium, this colored nasturtium. And you'll see here that there's these little cutouts and the black cardstock shows through, except for I was smart enough to keep the little pieces after I cut it out here, and I'll inlay them. So this is that panel that I dry embossed and then ink blended, and now I'm going to die cut this panel out of it, or this image die out of it again. What this leaves me with is a negative space to inlay my stacked die. Now here I show you that those two little pieces are still in the die, and I am going to leave them that way. Now I am also going to die cut this tiny little skinny frame from Simon Says Stamp. I wish this die worked better. It's a super cool die. It die cuts this tiny little thin frame. I have gone back and forth. I used the metal shim. I used shims of cardstock. I could not get it to cut all the way. I have contacted Simon Says Stamp, and they say things like, well, you just gotta use the metal shim. I have tried like Post-it tape. I've tried all sorts of things. I honestly feel like I have a faulty die. See, I even have to cut. I mean, it was completely die cut, and I still had to use my scissors to snip it in that one area. It is what it is. I'm hoping that someday I'll be able to replace it, and it'll work better. So this is an old Thanks die from Amuse Studio. I have had this for a very, very long time, and I also die cut this several times from some black cardstock, and I will stack that as well. But it is going to go across my floral panel. I guess it would be a floral panel, right? My flowers. And since those have some dimension to them, I didn't just stack that. I did do a little bit of a trick. In order to get everything lined up, I had to start putting my card together. So first I put that outer frame onto the black panel, which is going to be the background. And then I added this piece here to the little black panel that was left when I cut out black frame, so it all matches in size. Then I inlaid my flower and pieced all of the negative, is it the negative or it's probably the negative, back into place. Added all the little pieces that I had hanging around. And then I added some adhesive and adhered down these two pieces that were left in the die, and I just put the die over top and then poked them through, lined everything up really easy without having those little pieces running around on my desk. So then I put a little bead of adhesive here around and fit in this little tiny black frame, and this is when I die cut that's how I got the little black panel that's behind my main image panel there. And then I adhered this down inside. So see how I got black, orange, flowers. So my thanks needs to span the flowers. So what I did is I cut off the T and part of the H and then the S's, and I layered these on top of each other. Because they are going to match the same height as the flower panel, and that way I don't need to add any foam tape or anything behind them. Just the cardstock is fine. And the S is actually like stuck to my hand. And then I was like, oh, there it is. Because it was kind of like sticky. So yeah, I did lose it. And I even backed up my footage to see where it was. And then I put this little tag inside the negative space so that I could stamp it. Sometimes it's hard to keep little tiny things like that from sliding around even on your MISTI or stamp positioner. So I try to use the negative space for that as often as possible. I added some little white dots to the insides of my nasturtiums just to add a little bit of contrast and a little more detail to those flowers. That took me forever and 7,000 markers to color. I added little tiny drops of this liquid adhesive to the back of my thanks, and I placed that over top of my flowers. And it went down nice and easy because of the way I layered it. And then I did slip under a piece of thread. This is just some actual thread for sewing things. It's like nylon coated. It's a little thicker than like regular thread, but I made a little tiny bow and adhered it to the word thanks between the K and the S, and then adhered down my little tag that says for you, and added some of these really pretty black gems from Pink and Maine. I received them in a card kit a while back, and I think they are my favorite embellishment I have ever received in a card kit to date. They're just stunning, and it makes me think that I should probably pull them out and use them on every single card that I make, because I think that they're so pretty. And that pack has black and white. I'm not sure if they still have them in the store or not, or if they were able to, if they sold them separately, but I got mine in a card kit and they were super gorgeous. So that is the front of my card, and I have been on a mission to finish the insides of my cards. I was inspired by one of my favorite YouTubers, Amanda at Rise and Procrastinate, and she has been finishing the insides of her cards. So I did stamp the inside of that card with a nasturtium, and these are some close-up still shots of my card. I'd love to know what you think. I would love it if you would like and subscribe and comment. The comments are my favorite. I absolutely appreciate you stopping by. Like I said, I'll have that blog post linked below in the description, and as always, give cards generously. Bye!